We are back on Monday, January 23rd. It's a snow day here. I'm Patrick Cody at Okemo Valley TV, and I'm joined once again by Tesha Buss, state rep for Woodstock, Plymouth, and Reading. Welcome, Tesha. Thank you for coming back.
Thanks for having me back.
And so, how are you spending this snow day there in Woodstock?
Well, I've already been on a Zoom call with Legislative Council to talk about exemptions or employment protections with schools, and now that we will be giving state dollars towards tuitions with faith-based schools, we have to look at what is called ministerial exception and compelled speech. So this is sort of like a course in law school, except I'm just getting it all as a legislator. So, just light topics to wake up to on a Monday morning.
Get the week started off on the right foot, right? That's
right.
Yeah, just jump right in. No need to ease into things. I mean, I'm sure, I mean, are you finding that you just have to hit the ground running? It sounds like a lot has already happened in the legislature, and I mean, I know it's sort of a compacted schedule because you're only there till May. So, what is that like? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's very gradual at all. You don't really ease into things.
There's absolutely no ease about this job in any way, shape, or form. It is all about speed, your ability to receive a lot of information and process it so that you can not only be effective in your committee, but be effective to overall issues that concern your constituency. I'm on the education committee, but I represent 3 towns. Not everybody has children. Not everybody has children anymore that are in school. So I'm still trying to keep my feet on the ground. And that's why I visit the Issues Caucus, because that's what affects, I think, our communities the most. And it's exciting to hear those bills and to read those bills and to look at what rural Vermont's priorities are as a whole. But that means, a standing meeting every Thursday morning. It means that I've already read probably 400 pages worth of bills to potentially co-sponsor, but also to just educate myself on the priorities that are being put forth this year. So, we have folks that help steer us to say, these bills have been coming back and around and back and around and back and around. So this has the likelihood of actually coming up for a vote. 2,000 bills will probably get presented, and then they go to committee. And then in committee, if it doesn't get picked up, it likely will never come to a vote. So it's really important to manage your time resource and look at what has the likelihood of going all the way through.
Yeah, so there's a lot to it.
There's a lot to it.
Yeah.
Managing calendars and emails with constituents and other folks, and reading report after report after report so that we can make the best decisions.
And does anything really prepare you for all of that work, or that style of work, that level of intensity?
I think that nothing can quite prepare you for the accumulation of everything, but I do love I do love to just dive in headfirst and be a little overwhelmed. I feel really kind of at my fighting weight in those types of situations, but I'm very grateful for the fact that I have managed multiple projects simultaneously throughout my time of being an entrepreneur and an advocate for childcare. So I am used to bouncing to many different topics, and that is quite helpful.
We talked to you a week ago today. What's happened since then? What are some of the highlights? I know the governor gave his budget address over the course of the week. Do you want to touch on that a bit and your first impressions?
Yes, I sure do. This was a really exciting speech, and I'm going to start with a number. The governor spent, if I've calculated correctly, $1.5 million per word of his speech. Now, that was the written word out on the page. He probably spoke more words in person that I didn't count, but But when the speech was put into print, that is, I think, what it was. And for every $1 of state funds, there are $4 of federal funds coming down. So this is an unprecedented time for Vermont. And overall, I believe the governor has done a very calculated and thoughtful job of figuring out how to invest that money really well. One of the things I'll start with is the Vermont State Colleges, which is now turning into the Vermont University. And so it was in a really challenging state, and they now have combined so that they can reduce infrastructure, so that they can pull all their classes together. They now have what's called in-person plus. So you can come and take your class at your specific location, but then also be connected to all of the other classes that are in the other parts of the state, which is really exciting. The other thing, when they came to speak to the education committee, and what I found most exciting was that the average age is 29. And 70% of the folks that attend the Vermont State University are people who live here in Vermont and stay in Vermont. So we are training folks in jobs with the Vermont State University more than I can't say more than UVM, but it's a really important part of its mission, and it's part of our Vermont success. And other universities are lagging in enrollment, and they are actually staying a 0.5% above. So I'm so happy to see that there was a lot of support for that. I also liked the fact that Governor Scott is putting money away so that we can do matching grants in the future. I think that that's what harms a lot of Vermont small businesses, is that you go in for a grant and you're supposed to match it by $30,000, and that's really challenging for a lot of folks. So I think that is very financially prudent and responsible. He did put in a lot of extra money for childcare, which I in general support, of course, because childcare needs all the help it can get. But we still have some real strong work to do on the regular basis. Throwing money at it is only one part of its potential solution. He also put a lot of money into housing, particularly the VHIP program. VHIP specifically helps create small accessory dwelling units, which is, I think, the key to rural Vermont. The Woodstock housing workforce I think that's their title. They are working on what they call invisible infill, because everybody wants Vermont to look exactly the way that it is. So this kind of bill helps to create places and apartments where the exterior of the building isn't adjusted. So you just created housing and nobody knows it. So that's a wonderful program, and I'm really happy he threw a lot of money to that. He did propose some tax cuts, and that's kind of a counter to his sort of save for the future sort of thing, because a tax cut is forever a tax cut, and so we forever have to make sure that we can afford that. Now, I don't disagree with why he chose that particular group of folks, the veterans and Social Security, but it also begs the question of how many other groups will then come forward and ask for the same tax cut. And so that's something we look at a lot. We think, gosh, let's try to help EMS get recruitment, because we need more folks to volunteer. So let's provide a tax credit. Let's provide a credit on their property taxes. And then the question always ends up in committee is, where does this end? And you have to think about every single group that would request that exemption and that tax reduction, and whether or not we as a whole of Vermont can afford that.
So to you, the tax cuts is about, it sounds like there's maybe a danger in the precedent setting.
That's right. It's not to say that I don't think our veterans deserve it and our folks on Social Security. I mean, absolutely. I wholeheartedly believe that this help is needed. But it does always raise that other question. And it's the other question that I look at for a lot of the things we're trying to solve in Vermont. So I'm trying to take real strong care into thinking about the consequences of the decisions that we make when it's going to cost Vermonters something for a long time.
Mhm. So overall, you would say that it sounds like you're hearing a lot of you have a positive reaction to the governor's address overall.
Overall, yes. There was something else he mentioned, which is to, potentially work to bring in more immigrants and to train new Americans. And he did that because of workforce. We really need workforce, and bringing other folks in also provides diversity in our communities, which is also wonderful overall. So I appreciated that as well. There was a strong focus in rural Vermont, and in fact, he even mentioned Reading, which is
I
exciting.
did hear that. Mhm.
Yeah, because Reading is considering it's a very, very dense downtown community. And, if you need to replace a septic system, the issue is that you may not be able to do the thing that building was always permitted to do, or have the number of bedrooms in your home that your home was always, that you were always having in your home, because of the limited real estate. And we now have stronger regulations than we did. And, whenever those septic systems were put in, and most of them we don't even have actual paper permits for, to see how their design was completed, because before 2006 you didn't have to register with the state, and not everybody registered with the town. So this work in rural development is super important for us to know what we can do for our towns. It may not be financially prudent to have a public water or wastewater system in Reading, but it allows us to study the problem so that we can create alternative solutions if that's not the most viable one.
Mhm. And is this, I mean, I imagine there must be some parallels with your work on the rural caucus. Are these some of the issues, you're looking at infrastructure issues and that kind of thing in the caucus?
Yes, we are. We're looking at infrastructure issues. We're looking at, potential storm mitigation, because there are some things that towns can do to ensure that culverts are installed properly, and where they need to be installed, and that takes a lot of money, or replacement of bridges and whatnot. So we definitely look at disaster mitigation and overall rural infrastructure, and then housing, because a lot of the programs are really designed to help larger scale developers.
Mhm.
One of the things that's really important to me is to help. How do we help the average person who really could use help taking their huge, 1840s house and dividing it up into two different spaces, so that somebody could live, making it a duplex, somebody can live next door, because they're really struggling financially. And that could make a huge difference. But the process of going through the permits, obtaining the financing, finding the contractors, figuring out how you do the design, submitting them to the Department of Fire Safety, going through the inspections, all of that can be a super overwhelming process. And yet, that right now is the best solution and the fastest option to creating more housing, and to creating a financial help to those Vermonters.
Mhm. Well, you just touched on something else I wanted to bring up, and maybe this will be the final note. But I do get the local papers, and I did see your op-ed in the Vermont Standard, in it, where you sort of mentioned the sort of some of that onerous process of going through. This was specific to the Act 250 process, and you want to talk about what you wrote there in the Standard, and how that relates to. I guess this was directly in response to the Peacefield Farm situation.
Well, I mentioned Peacefield Farm because it's the latest on-farm commercial entity that has hit the news cycle. But I do want to be clear, what my article was focused on is on-farm commerce in general, and the fact that the Natural Resources Board made recommendations to make this process more transparent, to train farmers so that they know when they could trigger Act 250 and when they will not trigger Act 250. It helps for farmers to collaborate with one another. So if I have a small farm and I only grow, potatoes and carrots, but next door they grow a lot of different exotic kohlrabi and eggplant and whatnot, I can combine and sell their product and my product to make that farm threshold that's required so that you don't trigger Act 250. And to be clear, Act 250 is the reason why Vermont looks the way Vermont looks. These criteria are very, very important. But we also could look at the expense that it takes upfront to do Act 250. So let me give you an example. When we renovated the building where Rainbow Play School now is housed, and a second after school program called the Community Campus is now housed. So we take care of that building from 6 weeks to 13 years of age. If folks in the 1990s who were incredibly generous had not gone through the Act 250 process for me, all I had to do was an administrative amendment to bring it back into being a school again. But if I had to do that project from scratch, that permit would have cost me $53,000 on top of the permits I would need for the Department of Public Safety for fire and sprinkler and egress and all of that. And our lawyer said, I will not let you close on this building until all of your permits are in place, because we need to make sure that this is a sound investment for this small nonprofit to have their own permanent home and own a building. And he was right. But if I had to put out $53,000 up front just to see if I could qualify under Act 250 to open the school, I don't think we would have made that gamble. And then I look at, we want small businesses here in this state, but is the upfront cost of that permit prohibitively expensive to the tune that it will actually keep out the folks that we really, really want because only the folks that can have that kind of cash up front that you can't borrow from a bank, only those folks will be able to develop here. That's my concern. And so I think people need to have a greater understanding of Act 250. And that's the reason why I wrote that specifically for farm businesses. But I think overall, we need to learn about the permitting process as well. It's not about wanting to, take away that regulation. A lot of that regulation is very, very important. But I would like to find a way for small business owners to be able to come in and not have that upfront cost be so expensive, because that's the gamble.
Sounds like there's a lot of opportunity for, I'm sure your view is probably shared by others in the legislature, and it echoes a little bit of what you hear from the governor. It sounds like there could be a lot of opportunity to work together.
I sure do hope so. I have some meetings set up with, moving forward with some folks that right now I'm just trying to gain information. I see things from my little small business and, childcare advocacy perspective, but I really want to do my research and speak to, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns and see how they provide a lot of feedback to the Rural Caucus. I want to speak to other small business owners. I want to speak to other farmers. I want to speak to big business owners. So right now, the advocacy work I'm doing is, if you have had an experience that you want to share, that's what I need right now. I need testimony that's not in committee. I just need testimony that's to me, so I can accumulate it all together and put something to a committee to be discussed.
Great. I guess we'll leave it there, and we know how to reach you. We'll put Representative Buss's contact information there on the screen, and through the legislative email address there. And if anybody has a question, I guess send it your way.
That sounds great. Thank you for this time, Patrick.
You bet. And I swear, one of these times we will be joined by Tom Ayers of the Vermont Standard. He was not able to make it today, but we're looking to start that next week. So we'll keep you posted and look forward to having you back.
Excellent. I look forward to it.